Welcome to The Empty Canvas, the podcast about how creativity begins. I'm the host, Pascal Anson, and today I'm joined by artist Barnaby Barford. Barnaby, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
I'm really excited to talk to you. When I was thinking about The Empty Canvas and talking to you, I was thinking about a sort of, I wasn't really planning what I wanted to say, but I have a bit of a structure that I'd like to kind of prepare you with, if that's all right.
Yeah.
You've got a show at the moment in London, and I want to talk about how you start thinking about a show with a huge amount of work in, as one thing to talk about. I'd also like to talk about material and how you start working with a material, because I know your background's in ceramics. And then also I'd like to talk to you about how you start an individual piece.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about starting from scratch, those are the three things I'd really like to discuss with you.
Sure.
Can we maybe start with the show?
Sure.
So it's at David Gill Gallery in central London, and it's called, I keep thinking it's called It Is What It Is, but it's not. It's called
We Are Where We Are.
We Are Where We Are, yes. Okay. You can see why I get confused.
Yeah.
We Are Where We Are. So I think I went there yesterday and I was astounded at the work. It's absolutely a sensation, and congratulations for that. There's so much of it. I think that was the thing that really surprised me the most. I've seen your work before and I've seen it online, and I thought it just looked absolutely spectacular. But I wanted to ask you how you started about when somebody comes to you and says, we'd love you to do a show, how does that process start?
Okay, so I've worked with David Gill Galleries for 22 years. And so we were chatting, and it's like, oh yeah, it's been 20 years, we should do an exhibition. So from that moment, I'm thinking, right, well, what's the exhibition? What could it be? And we were talking whether it was sort of some new work, whether it was a bit of a survey, not retrospective, but just sort of some new work and some older works, and just sort of chart that sort of 20 years together. And then I started making a work. I made one, and then we'd made a few commissions, which were these sort of 1.3 meter diameter light sculptures, which are covered in about 7,000 ceramic pieces that I get made with fragments of word drawings on them. And I'd got one of these base, what would you call it? Like the
armature, the structure.
Yeah, the armature, the structure in the studio. And I was going to make something else, and I'd thought, well, quite like to try it with some different materials. I'd quite like to try it with some broken ceramics over it, see how that comes out. And then as I started doing it, I was like, not sure whether I really want it. It might look, what is this thing? And then I thought, it might be quite interesting to start working with porcelain figurines again. And they're a material that I was using when I first started working with David, and worked that way for about 10 years. I'd done loads of different things. I'd made a film for Channel 4 through the Arts Council and Animate projects. But in 2011, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I was like, never again am I going to work with figurines. And
The thing about never again is, when people say never again, there's always a bit after that story, which is, but then.
never say never. And then, I got rid of like hundreds of figurines. I just gave them back to charity, and, just got rid of everything. And I embarked on making very different work, still with industrially made ceramics, but very different work. And so I thought, well, it could be quite an interesting time to work with figurines again. And so I made this piece called Global Britain, which is that same 1.3 meter diameter sphere. It's covered in broken plates, all with Made in England back stamps. And there's a platform that runs around it, about 2/3 of the way down, and I wanted to do a queue of figures all around it. So they're this sort of, I call it a sort of queue of futility, this endless queue. They're just sort of queuing for nothing. And they're all found figurines with, where I've cut the heads off and put animal heads on. And then above them is a kind of Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos character on a rocket ship, sort of flying around. And it's called Global Britain, the piece. And I'm kind of interested in the queue. I've used it throughout my work, and who queues, who doesn't, our sort of acceptance of that structure.
What do you mean, who queues?
Well, there are people that don't queue, isn't there?
Okay.
You know, the sort of rich and powerful.
I thought you meant who gives the cues for things.
No,
No,
like
okay,
who's
so
actually in the queue. Who's
Yeah,
actually in the
okay,
queue.
fine.
And then it was like interesting thinking about the queue dynamic. You know, it's kind of interesting. We stand very close to each other, don't we, in queues? And so I made that piece, and I was like, okay.
So independently of the show, you
I just made that.
You
piece.
made that piece. Okay.
And then I was, well, it was sort of like 9:30, and you're thinking, and then I was like, right, yeah, I'm going to, and then so I start thinking about, so the gallery's like, what do you want to do for this exhibition? So then working on that, and then I'm sort of drawing and thinking of other objects without a concept of the objects, but yeah, I'd like to make some big mirrors. I'd like to do another hanging light sculpture. I've always worked with mirrors, so like some smaller mirrors, and then some individual pieces. So you've got a kind of rough structure. So I'll do drawings, and I'll work it out, and then I'll go back to the gallery and say, look, I'm interested in this sort of area.
And are you telling them themes at that point?
Yeah.
Or are you just telling them there's going to be some individual pieces on plinths, there's going to be some wall-mounted mirrors, and then there's going to be some free-hanging things?
There's that, and then also what I'm interested in looking at.
Okay.
So so this exhibition's it's called We Are Where We Are, which the title came much later, but it's a phrase that I actually hate. And it is what it is.
Yeah. But it is what it is.
Yeah. And you know, I'm really interested in politics, and you know, I've always sort of explored our sort of social political landscape in my work, and kind of interested in, you know, you open the paper or social media or the news, and it's like, oh shit, what? You know, what now? And it's absolutely outrageous. And then the next day there's something else, and the next day there's something else. You know, each day seems to outdo the last. And the thing that you're outraged about, you know, on day one,
On Monday,
it
by
sort
Friday,
of barely registers anymore, doesn't it?
I love that. I read that it's written on the piece near the desk about the things that we were outraged about, like yesterday or, you know, before. Now they don't even register as something.
And I'm interested in how we're coping with that. So I didn't want to make work about the things that are going on, but more how do we deal with that? And so the exhibition, so then I'll go with that sort of very loose concept of this is what I want to be looking at. These are sort of the areas, and these are the objects. And then they're like, yeah, you know, great, crack on.
So thank you for explaining that. When I'm listening to you talking about it, it doesn't come from nothing though, does it? Because when you were working on figurines before this exhibition, they had that kind of similar like political flavor or kind of provocative flavor to them. So it wasn't a completely, although the pieces are, each one of them is brand new, it didn't come from a artistic brand new starting point.
Well, like lots of people said, oh, great, you've gone back to figurines.
Yeah, we love those.
And yeah, we love those. We haven't seen them for ages. And I was kind of pretty like, no, I haven't gone back to figurines. Like, to me, it feels like, I don't play music, but it feels like picking up an instrument that you haven't played for a long time, and then realizing that you can play all these new songs with it that you couldn't have even imagined last time you were working on it.
The figurines are a vehicle for you to tell stories.
Yeah.
And if the stories have changed in the intervening 10, 15 years.
Yeah, they have, haven't they?
Yeah. Then there are new stories to tell with a successful method that you've developed.
Yeah, I'm not sure I kind of, that sounds like I plan things and have a strategy, which I don't.
I didn't really mean it like that. I meant more that you innovated this way of telling stories through a three-dimensional collage of figurines with an overlay of something sinister, something to do with politics, some threat. And that's your innovation, which I hear that you stopped, but for whatever reason, maybe you can get into that later. But then you've got a new opportunity, and that gives you the new opportunities to tell new stories.
Yeah. I mean, they're interesting objects. They're objects that most people would sort of dismiss.
I can't go to a charity shop, by the way, without thinking you. Every time I see some little like evil rabbit looking sideways.
Yeah, I mean, but they're interesting. They're these sort of saccharine versions of life. I kind of like the idea that they've been designed. You can imagine the meeting in the ceramic factory, and they're going through drawings, and they're like, let's make the woman that's standing there. Let's make the tramp who's here. That's kind of funny meeting, isn't it? Thinking about those meetings.
I always love thinking about things like that, though. I love thinking about the boardroom meeting where they're discussing something really terrible.
Yeah.
And everyone's like,
yeah,
that's just, it's wonderful work.
Just sort of choosing which objects they're going to manufacture, because they're not going to be cheap to manufacture. And then they've had a life, so they've been manufactured, they've been made with care or whatever, and then they've had a life. Somebody's bought them, they've sat on the mantelpiece for whatever, and then they've gone to a charity shop or eBay, unloved. And then I picked them up, and my studio's absolutely full of them.
There are none left. I've heard there are none left in the whole of the UK. I've been noticing.
They're just putting the prices up.
They're either really, really expensive or they're just not there.
But to me, they're ready-made people. I've sort of feel like a casting director, and it's really great. As soon as you on their own, they don't mean very much, but as soon as you put two together, like there's this brand new dialogue happening between them, and you stick a different head on, or you tilt it at a different angle, and suddenly you're like they sort of fizz into life, and so I see them as I'm making work thinking about people, so they're people.
So absolutely. Even though they've got a rabbit's head or a pig's head on.
Well, there's a long history in that, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. So can I just stop you there? When I'm looking at one of your pieces and we're thinking about this idea of the story that you want to tell and how you're telling it through these objects, and you're telling me that you start to, well, first of all, you're splitting two things apart and putting one bit on the other. Then you're putting that assembled piece with another assembled piece to see what kind of tension there is between those two. Is that very organic in terms of putting A with X and seeing what dynamic happens and what story you can tell? Or are you thinking, I want to tell the story of, I don't know, I really love this one about you're exactly how I prompted you.
Yeah, that's that's a perceptive question, actually, because it can happen both ways. So I'll be, I won't have a list of themes on the wall, but I'll be thinking of, right, how are we coping? What's going on?
You don't have a list on the wall. Because
Not
when I looked, I thought, gosh, you must in the studio. There must be.
Sometimes I have lists, but like not of protest, pharmaceuticals, robots. Like that generally builds. Like this is 2 years' work, so it builds over time of the different things. But what can happen is I'm looking through eBay for figures. And I'll be looking for something, but other things will come up. And then it'd be like, you see like the pharmacist with the little boy and the grandma. And it's like, oh, great. Yeah, brilliant. I'll get that. Because that could be, not sure what I'm going to do with it yet, but it's a pharmacist.
Okay.
So you're like,
somebody, a Ladro figure, for example, of a very saccharine image of a doctor looking after a young child. That's the sort of the image of the figurine, right? In stage one of its life.
Yeah.
So you then look at that and think, oh,
that could be something
to
quite
do with Big
interesting.
Pharma, or to
Yeah,
do
yeah,
with,
yeah.
Okay.
So I've got, which I didn't do the work, but there's a mum, pretty glamorous, which is kind of weird, but reading a book to a girl in bed, and it's like that could be interesting, thinking about book bans and this and that, or what's she reading to the child. So and then there's works, and then sort of came across all these figures which are based on Norman Rockwell paintings. So Norman Rockwell's an American painter, did lots of, his work is very, very famous, lots of adverts and lots of paintings of like, sort of American scenes.
Yeah.
And it's like, usually the figurines aren't charged before I do something to them, but they were quite charged.
I love this. I love that word.
Yeah, well, they, were. And so, like, I've changed. There is this one with a little boy looking over his father's shoulder.
Oh, yeah.
And originally, it was a report card that the father was reading.
So he's in an armchair, isn't he?
Yeah. And so I've changed the book to be Fascism for Dummies. And I love it, because it's sort of taken that. The original image is already, if you know the original image is already charged, but you don't have to know.
So there's an original painting. Then there's a ceramic company that want to reproduce not necessarily the image, but they want to reproduce that feeling of.
No, they've reproduced the image, so that, like, it's actually,
But it's 3-dimensional, isn't it?
Yeah, it's 3-dimensional.
And then. But with that, the thing that they're really reproducing is the sentiment.
Yeah. I mean, it looks pretty close. I mean, in a ceramic way.
But then you're looking at that with fresh eyes and subverting it into a completely different meaning.
Yeah. I think I've always, I don't know, ever since I can remember, sort of, even from a kid, just looking at something and being like, imagine if that was
upside down.
Yeah, or completely different. Or imagine if this thing happened now.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting thing of working with found objects, because you've got this interest, what's going on, how are we coping, and then so there's a whole sort of bag of ideas and directions that you can go, but then you're finding figures. And so you're responding to the figures with that in.
But that's like casting director, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's how I guess a filmmaker would go about.
Yeah.
I've got a story I want to tell, and I've got a loose idea of the story. Somebody else is going to write that story, but then I'm going to find people to portray that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's exactly that.
Can you go back a little bit to the word charged? Because I felt like we just glossed over that a little bit. I love how you've used that, where something that isn't charged, right? So I think the father reading the book while the son is looking over his shoulder is not charged. It's just yet. And then
Well,
you do
I
something-
don't know. I think when you kind of look at, say, like Norman Rockwell's work, it becomes charged as soon as you look at it in terms of like America today.
Right, absolutely, and that's sort of what I was meaning. You can look at something like that with no kind of baggage, and it just is a kind of naive, lovely scene. But then once you start thinking and questioning, you're like, oh, hang on, wait a minute. And then what if? And then what if that's that? And what if, like, what does that mean now?
But that's making work, isn't it?
Yeah, but not. I think not. But you're an artist and I'm an artist. Not everyone thinks like that, and that's the point of this. I think that is the point of this conversation. That you can look at something and not read anything into it and just think, oh, that's lovely. But then once you start thinking and start questioning, that's when it becomes dangerous and exciting and charged.
Yeah, I mean I always think of it as it's quite privileged, isn't it? Like being able to
Think. A question.
No, but do it as a job. You know, just like
absolutely.
looking and questioning and thinking. And it's interesting to think where that fully formed. I don't even know whether it's fully formed. It still develops, doesn't it? You're still kind of working stuff out. But at what stage of your learning and growing did you really start
Questioning things.
Questioning things and interrogating things? And
on that point, when I went to the gallery yesterday, I spoke to one of the assistants and she said, some people come in and go, these are so pretty. I love them. They look really, really pretty. And she was kind of like, and I can't believe that's what they see. But that goes back to this same point of people not really knowing how to look or not looking beyond. Your work is very pretty, but like, I would never describe it as.
I mean, it's quite, but you know,
that's not the first adjective that comes to mind.
No, but you know, it's quite unfashionable, isn't it? But I really do like making beautiful things, and I think that work that attracts me is it has a hook, right? You know, I want you to come and I'm like, hey, come and have a look at this. And so how do I get you to come and have a look, and how do I get you to engage with the narrative, with the questioning? So
But
I do that
so
through beauty, through details. So it looks like one thing, and then you get closer, and then you're drawn into looking at all the details, and then you read like the title, and it's sort of, you kind of have all of these different steps to keeping you there.
Absolutely, absolutely. 100%. It felt like I walked in and I was overwhelmed by the amount of work that was there. And exactly what you say, that it was kind of, I took these steps towards the work until I was like looking at the Greggs sausage roll bag, which is, you know, 2 centimeters by 2 centimeters, and then backing off a little bit and then reading the caption. And I think that's one of the strengths, is that it does that kind of enticement or drawing you into looking
I think
at it.
with a lot of art, there's a kind of power game between artwork and viewer, and generally the sort of artwork is the sort of powerful partner, and it can, you know, to somebody just looking at it's like, oh, this is not necessarily intimidating, but it's like, oh, okay, you're reverent. And I'm not like that as a person, and I don't want my artwork to be like that. I want to, to welcome, hey, come and have a look at this. Come and have a look.
But it's familiar, so everybody's seen a figurine, so it's instantly super accessible, whether you're a kid going there or whether you're an old person going there or anybody in between. I think it's super accessible because everybody's seen a figurine. They've not seen it how you've done it, but everybody has got a ticket into that straight away.
Yeah.
And I think, again, that's your innovation.
Well, I think that's a lot of, a lot, when you think about it, a lot of work is interesting when it's got that thing of, recognizable but different. And it makes you look at something in a new way. And I've sort of done that with shops. Through the Tower of Babel project at the V&A, through the Apple, and it's sort of, hey, look at this really interesting thing that we kind of walk past or dismiss or overlook, and it's this thing that
look at it through my eyes.
Yeah, it's like you see the potential in things.
So let's go to those other projects for a moment, and maybe with the Apple, because I can see some correlation between the Tower of Babel shops and the figurines, just in terms of scale. There's something, the message is something completely different. But a bit different. But can we talk about the Apple, because I feel like that was very different to the figurines.
Okay, it's interesting because it's
Tower of
like
Babel.
So. I had.
How did that start?
Okay. So just to go back a little bit, because it's never really, although a lot of my works from the outside looks sort of project based. I work to an exhibition and then I work to another exhibition. There's a sort of thread of interest that goes through. So, I've been making works with the figurines, thinking about our sort of socio-political environment. Then I did, when I stopped doing that, I did the 7 Deadly Sins. I'm quite interested in, I'm quite interested in going back to the beginning on things and, of morality and sin and desire. And then after that, I did an exhibition called Me Want Now, and that was after the Tower of Babel. And then I did Me Want Now. And it was, so the Tower of Babel was looking at, sort of looking at a class divide that's how it started in London, rich and poor, and doing that through the shops. And, but then it became understanding how our economy works and how we're not, we're sort of destined to be consumers. And so then I was looking at I did Me Want Now during the Brexit referendum, which was thinking about how easily we're sort of manipulated by sort of, a stressed society, sort of stressed consumerist society that's not bound to be happy because they need to keep consuming, how that is easily manipulated. And then, so I was kind of sort of like touching on happiness. And then I thought, you know what, I want to look at happiness as a concept on its own. So the way I start is I'll do lots of research and reading, and I start looking at it from a biological point of view, going to things at the Wellcome Trust. You just suddenly start looking, right, what is it? Like
to do with happiness.
Talks that are on, and I was sort of reading and looking at faith, economics, politics, different economic systems, and I'll dip in and out of books and I'll find bits, and I do like a big body of research. And then I sort of came to this sort of conclusion that we had an incessant need for more. And so I started doing these drawings of writing the word more. I make word drawings, which repeats the same word. And then I was sort of writing these lists, like more money, more sex, more hair, more likes, more guns, more war. And it's just like, wow, that sort of, that moment of like, whoa, I could put anything on the end, like more bananas. And it just felt like, oh, that I'd sort of touched on this. Gosh, that's what it feels like, isn't it? Like nothing's ever enough. So I was making those, and then I thought, wow, what's the original more? Right, well, you know. And so I thought, oh, Adam and Eve, you know, they had everything, didn't they? Supposedly, but pretty easily tempted into wanting more, weren't they? And so I thought, oh, I want to do an apple tree. So I started working on this apple tree, and I thought, yeah, it'd be great if people could sort of buy an apple and then actually pick it off the tree. So we sort of engineered this stalk so it snapped off the tree. So you kind of reenact that moment of the downfall of mankind. And then I started thinking, the apple, and it was like, it's Adam and Eve, and it's Judgment of Paris, and it's Heracles, and it's Steve Jobs, and it's Newton, and it's William Tell, and the American frontier, and the Beatles, and it's like, yeah, Christ, like that's interesting.
So one thing opened. So I think you've explained that really, really well about how your work evolves through to looking at happiness, through to looking at morality, and then thinking about Adam and Eve, and then the apple tree.
And then you've got a vehicle to look at that with.
But hang on, then it sort of stops and you complete that piece. But then that opens up a whole new kind of thought process, which is not to do with that initial thought.
But it is. It still is, because you've got a vehicle then to explore what you were thinking, like the idea of more.
Mm-hmm.
You've got like this vehicle to work with it.
So the apple is the vehicle.
Yeah, apple is the vehicle. So it's sort of, I made a big apple, which I didn't know. Like I always work with a scale model of the gallery, and I start putting works in as the concept sort of grow and become more concrete. And I had this gap, and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to put there. I don't know what I'm going to put there. And then I just had it in the studio, and I put one of these apples that I was working on, and I just put it in there, and I was like, wow.
Oh, well, like an actual apple?
Well, a model of an apple that I was working on. I just put that in there, and I was just like, wow, that looks good. It's a massive apple.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, what? I don't want to just do a massive apple. Like, that's sort of been done. And so then I also had loads of rotting apples in the studio, which don't rot. If you buy an apple, they don't rot. They just shrivel. And so I had all these shriveling apples, and I thought, well, that's kind of...
Why did you have that in the studio?
Because I was looking at apples.
Okay.
I was looking at the apples, so obviously I had loads of apples. And, I was looking at... I look at... What I do is I kind of start looking, so I notice something, start looking, and then look at everything. I want to just collect all of the thoughts and data and pictures and stuff. And in that entirety of... we call it data. That's a bit of a dry way of talking about it.
It's research. But it's collecting
it
stuff.
kind of builds its own story. You don't really have to do very much.
But you did that after you did the apple tree, right? Because
it was made in the same time.
Right, but you didn't do all that research first of all, and then you decided to do an apple tree.
I did the apple tree, and then so I did the research and apple tree. Then I did the apple tree, like the concept of the apple tree, and started making that. And then it's like, oh, the apple is interesting, isn't it? And it's even all the other artists that have used the apple, it's you can either shy away from that, or you go, yeah, I kind of want to, I can be part of that story as well. And so then that suddenly opens up. It's sort of like it grows, doesn't it? It grows. You sort of open. I used to say, like, it's sort of, you open this little door, and it's like, oh Christ, yeah, I knew all of this stuff, but when you put it together, it sort of becomes really interesting.
Mm.
And then, you know, so the big apples were like half shriveled, but they had this sort of really, even it looked like ceramic, didn't it? Like this really shiny single color over it. And that then became, with the titles, the first one was called Land of Hope and Glory. And, you know, they became thinking about, you know, those in power and their sort of incessant need for more and the effect that that then has on everybody else.
Can I go back to something that you said a moment ago when you were saying about, I realized that lots of other people had done projects and artwork to do with an apple, and I wanted to do something, I wanted to have a go. That takes some confidence, because I think a lot of people would be like, oh, lots of artists have done something with an apple before, it's been done, and I don't think I can add enough to it to make.
I had a fantastic tutor at the Royal College, Jefford Horrigan, and we're friends and I still see him. And when I was working on this, I was kind of really stuck, and I was like, well, what are these apples going to be, and what's going to what are they going to be on the tree and stuff. And he, you know, he said, you know, he said two things. It's like, you make work with things, not about things. And that's just like, it's like taking a big rucksack off, and it's like, oh yeah, you just make work with something, and you're also interested in this other thing, and the two things will end up colliding.
But my point is, I think you have to get to that point where that makes sense. It makes sense to him. He's telling that to you, and you're accepting that, as opposed to thinking, well, because how you're explaining it is like, oh yeah, okay, then I'll take that big weight off and do what you say. But I think there's confidence within that to know that that's the right thing to do, and that you'll be able to go through that process as an artist yourself.
Yeah,
it's not that easy. I'm teasing you with that, because I don't think that you're saying it like it's really easy, but I don't think that's that easy. I think that takes a lot of confidence.
Yeah, I don't know. There's people that you trust, right? When they say things, you listen. He also said, you know, about this using the apple, he kind of used the analogy of cowboy movies, and sort of went through the history of cowboy movies. And it's just like, yeah, you don't, just because, you know, there's been some great cowboy movies made, you don't,
doesn't mean that you
doesn't mean Tarantino can't make a cowboy
or that you can make,
or it becomes part of the genre, doesn't it?
Yeah. I think that's such a great point for people to hear, because when we're making work, I think there's always like a lot of doubt in your mind. And I doubt everything all the time. That's good to hear, because I think a lot of people do that. And it's that voice in your head is kind of saying, yeah, you should just stop. You should just, like, that's not a good thing to work on.
Oh, that's interesting, because I don't think that.
How does it present for you then?
So I have an idea, and it's like, it's a fantastic idea.
I am the greatest.
Brilliant idea. Yeah. This is going to be brilliant. And then the closer that gets to becoming a reality, in terms of I've started making it, I'm looking at it, I've started fabricating it, and it's there. It's like, oh God, this is quite shit, isn't it? It's quite boring.
But what pushes you on? Because that's what I was going to say.
So that's this.
What keeps you going?
Well, you know, you've committed to it. You're making this piece, and so, like, for me, that's the work. The work is the bit where you go, oh, this is not very good. And then the work is the bit where you make it less shit.
Where you climb out of the hole and you like put the boots on and do the work.
You do the work.
Yeah.
Like that's the work. And then you get to a point where it's not, it's not as bad as it was. And you're like, okay, I think this is probably done now. So you might have to keep working, keep going. And it's like, then you get to a point where it's like, yeah, okay, I think this is pretty. And you might have people around you going, no, it's great. But like deep down, you're like, it's not good.
I think just before we finish, I wanted to just circle back to my initial request, which was, can we talk about how you start with material?
Yeah.
Well, because it's not always ceramic you work in.
No.
But that's your kind of origin material.
I mean, the reason why I got into ceramics was I was doing a 3D design course at the University of Plymouth in Exeter on my BA. So it was like it wasn't really design, it was a kind of materials-based course. And we did this slip casting project and made a model, made a 2-part mould in plaster, and then you pour in liquid clay slip and then pour it out after about 20 minutes. And then I opened it and it was like, wow, this is amazing. I can make any shape I want, like repeated. And so I just sort of fell in love with that process. And then bit by bit, just sort of, I've never, like I can work in clay, but I've never really worked in plastic clay. Like it's not my interest. I'm interested in industrially made ceramics. So, and it's fun to play with the industrial process, whether I make sculpture, unique sculpture out of thousands of industrially made pieces.
These are like the flowers and the printed.
Yeah. Or I work with things that have been made that I reconfigure, or using the industrial process and changing each one. So like the Tower of Babel, there was 4 shapes, but through the decals, through the transfers, each one's different. And so really it depends what you're doing. So sometimes it starts with, like, really it's the concept that starts, and then finding the material to match. So whether it's like a public artwork, okay, that needs to be in
not in
stainless steel, so, or I'm quite practical, so it needs to be in this material, it needs to be that material. But then what you find is, if you know a material, know a process, then you sort of end up thinking in that material, don't you?
That's very interesting. Yeah, but because I was wondering whether ceramics in whatever form was a default material for you when you're thinking about things.
No, I wouldn't say default.
Because you already mentioned that the apple had a kind of like ceramic glaze to it, which I thought was quite interesting, because presumably that's not made from
there's
ceramic.
Yeah, there's work in the exhibition that's not ceramic, but it looks like ceramic, and hard, shiny surfaces. So, but I sort of think through making. So I'm in the studio sort of 9:30 to 5:30, 5 days a week, and it's just getting there and I'm making. So with I suppose you start playing. I mean, it's a lot to do with play.
But you have experience in taking apart, breaking, sawing, chopping industrially made ceramics. That then allows you to play, because you're not playing in wood, or you're not playing in wood textile.
Yeah, no. No. So that's when that happens, then you've got a concept in it. Oh, I need this made in wood, or I need this made in, and then I'll go and speak to a fabricator about that or something. But I mean, it's really the point where sort of concept and material and knowledge of the material combine. It's not like the way that I work isn't material based. You know, I'm not there exploring what the material can do, and then that generates ideas. It's like more concept driven and research driven, and then I'm applying the materials to those thought processes.
I suppose I was thinking some of the figurine pieces could be 3D printed, but then lots of the things you've talked about during this conversation would disappear, and they wouldn't have all that stuff about kind of naivety and romance and juxtaposition and tension and...
Yeah, but we do use a 3D printer.
Do you?
Yeah, in the studio. Like
but not in the exhibit.
Yeah, use like components and bits and bobs that are made, and I'm actually quite interested in
secrets that are coming out.
Yeah, well, it's not a secret. It's like whatever I need to use.
Yeah,
is you know, so
I was looking hard at some of those stuff and thinking, how is that done?
So the columns on the on the feast sphere, they're 3D printed.
Good to know.
But I use this amazing paint that is used for ceramic restoration. It's a cold glaze, so 2-part, and then you can mix in oil paints, and it's incredible. It just looks like glaze.
Wow.
So yeah, you know, I'm not. Oh, it needs to be, you know, whatever works. Oh, I need some columns. Oh, let's just make some columns. Let's just model them and let's print them in the studio.
Yeah, that's good to hear. That's good to hear.
Like whatever works. Like the balloons, they're 3D printed. But it's like whatever. Like, oh, we need to. Okay, let's do that. Let's model that. Let's get that on.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not precious about the material.
Yeah, interesting. Good to hear. Good to hear. Just before we finish, I've got some rapid fire for you. So don't overthink this. Just respond, please. Pencil or marker?
Pencil.
Analog or digital?
Both.
Big sketches or little sketches?
Little sketches.
And would they be on loose sheets or in a sketchbook?
Sketchbook.
Keep mistakes or bin mistakes?
Keep mistakes, but it depends how bad they are. Oh no, it depends if they work. Sorry, that's not
like
quick
good
fire.
Mistakes.
Good mistakes. Like embrace mistakes. Embrace mistakes.
Right.
But you know, yeah.
Okay. Think then do, or do then think?
Think then do then think.
You said
do, like, think, do think, do think,
again.
do think,
Yeah.
do think.
Yeah, keep on doing it, yeah. And creative chaos or calm order in your studio?
Chaos.
Background noise or silence?
Background noise.
Finished or never finished?
Finished.
And maybe this is the last question, particularly relevant as you've been working towards a big show. Up all night to finish something or up early?
Up early. I like getting up early, but I'm not like, I don't leave stuff to the last minute.
No, okay, very good. Barnaby Barford, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you to my guest, Barnaby Barford, on this episode of The Empty Canvas. Please like and subscribe, and maybe send this to somebody that you think needs a bit of a nudge on their own creative journey. I'll see you in the next episode.